Mark, welcome to the Andy Storch Show.
Thanks, Andy. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, good to have you on. We connected, I think, through our mutual friend Alex Queller at the YMCA. We both
Yes.
work out on a regular basis, doing some yoga, lift some weights. I don't know what else you do there. I play a little basketball. I have a couple times popped in at 5 a.m. with Alex to play some Foursquare. Are you on that
hmm
crew?
No, I'm not. I'm not. My basketball days are over. I used to be an avid basketball player and play all different sports. But as I've gotten older, yoga and walking and being outside and swimming and things like that, old man stuff.
Old man stuff. Those are all great things as long as you're staying active and you're right, you're there, you're doing it. And I love people who follow me know I love the Y. I love the Y because it's such a great community and there are people of all ages there working out in all different levels. And there's the yoga class I go to every Saturday. There's two this couple who are both in their 80s who are there every Saturday practicing yoga. So you're never
Yeah.
too old.
Yeah. No,
Never
I
too
hear
old to
you.
go there.
That's a great why. I don't have any real benchmark for other whys, but that one is particularly, it's clean. Everyone's friendly. Everyone's nice. Everyone's attentive. It's a pretty awesome place.
Definitely. So listen, I was amazed when we got connected, and I knew you had done some impressive stuff. You had a long history in staffing and headhunting, things like that, and run a business. But going through your bio and all the stuff you've done, you've started and run and sold multiple $1 million companies, and just done a whole bunch of interesting stuff. But what really caught me is that you've got this such wisdom and experience and passion around helping people with career development, figuring out what they want to do, discovering, maybe it's not necessarily their passion, but what's their purpose or how do they find meaningful work? And it's timely that you and I have this conversation and have you
Mhm.
on because I don't even know if you knew this, but I'm writing a book right now. Of
I saw something about that. Yep.
Yeah, so I'm writing a book right now on career ownership and how people can take more ownership of their career. And it's funny because I'm just basing it on my life experience and how I want to help people, but I don't have real world, career coaching experience like you do. So maybe let's start with a little bit of your background and how you got into all of this, and then let's get into some kind of practical tips on how people can find that meaningful work.
Excuse me. Yeah, no, thank you. I tell this story a lot. It began a long time ago, 30 some odd years ago. I was motivated to find something that really kind of addressed my passion as opposed to just collecting a check. And my mom had a good friend of hers over, and she was remarrying a fellow from Australia. And we got to talking over a glass of wine. And I said, what do you do? And he said, I'm a recruiter for petrochemical engineers in Saudi Arabia. And I said, what's that mean?
Yeah.
And he described recruiting, which I didn't even know recruiting existed. I thought companies hired their own people and people look for their own jobs. And
Right.
but on top of that, he was recruiting a very distinctly skilled engineer to go to a place where nobody wanted to live for a very long period of time that wasn't
Yeah.
from there. So the contracts were rich, 4 or 5 times the salary you would get in the States, 3-year contracts, and a home with and meals and transportation all included. And his fees were in the hundreds of thousands of dollars per transaction.
Hmm.
And I thought, man, I got to go check that out. And this is how old I am. I answered a newspaper ad, and I went in for an interview on the following Monday, and they hired me on the spot, and that
Hmm.
began my career. And I was just very fortunate to have two excellent mentors, which is another topic I love to talk about. Very, very valuable in my career path. And I loved it. I loved the mediation, the negotiation, the serving other people, and with very, very, very important decisions. And it resonated with me, and I took right to it. And then after doing that for probably 5 or 6 years with two different mentors, I set off on my own with a partner to start a business that we turned into a pretty successful operation. And the rest is kind of history.
Yeah, and I think you sold that, right? And worked there and then started another one and sold that. I'm always curious because I've made a bit of the leap a couple of years ago, going from working for a consulting company to go out on my own, and I absolutely love it, but it's not for everybody. Take me back to that time where you working for someone and you decided to go out with a partner, you said, and set up a business. What was the biggest impetus for that? Was it the lure of making more money? Was it the risk? Was it just, it seemed like the right thing? And I want to know, like, what drove you and also what was your biggest fear at the time?
Excuse me. My daughters asked me, was I ever scared? And I guess it was naive because I said no. The first company, I was a part owner in the company and working with a mentor. He financed the whole thing, and
Cool.
I did all the work very simply, and it was heavenly. It was a great experience. When he sold that company, I stayed on as the, I guess, regional vice president of the acquisition company, and in 3 months determined very quickly that I did not want to work for anybody else, certainly not these people. And the way that I had been mentored, not unbeknownst to me at the time, was very efficient, very practical. It was high end. It was some of the best training in the industry. And I didn't know that until I was acquired by somebody else who suggested they did the same type of business, and they did not. So I was driven to that. Two things: I was ready, and I was working for someone that I didn't have a whole lot of respect for, and I just couldn't sustain that. And so I leaned over to a good friend of mine who'd worked for the same mentor years before, and I said, "Are you thinking what I'm thinking?" And he said, "Yeah, let's do it." And we didn't put a whole lot of money in. We put a lot of energy in, and we bootstrapped everything, and we did all the work ourselves until we didn't have to. And it was just a lot of fun. You know,
Mm,
and the barriers to entry in the staffing business are non-existent. If you can pick up a phone and talk,
yeah.
you qualify. And unfortunately, most of the people that are quote unquote headhunters, very transactional, not very relationship driven.
Mm,
So that was a niche that was easy to fill because I can't do much without being relationship based. It's just my nature. I get
yeah.
that from my dad. So
So you knew you would find a way to stand out because there were so many, we'll say, people that weren't really focused on the relationships, weren't really doing it right, and you knew if you focused on those relationships, you'd have a lot of repeat business, and you could be successful.
yeah, yeah. And the other thing I was taught was, do the best, be the best, and charge the most, and sell the value, not the price or the cost. And so,
Hmm.
when you're playing with people that feel that same way, they're not looking to nickel and dime you on stuff. They're not looking to. There's a mutual level of respect, and I have found that when you play like that, everything else operationally is easier.
Yeah. So basically, what you're saying is provide a really great experience, be the absolute best out there, sell on the value, and charge the most. Don't try to operate or try to sell on cost, but be the premium player in the space. And it sounds like you did that. You said you were a little bit naive going into it. It sounds like you had a lot of motivation to get away from working for the organization or people you're working for, and we've all been there. I know I have been. Um, but was there fear at the time that, like, oh, what if this doesn't work out? I'm going to fail. I'm going to look like a failure. I'm going to, be on the street or something like that.
There really wasn't, and I think I kind of was cheating because when my mentor sold the company, I got a pretty significant size check, and I had an equity position, and so that was I used it to build a beautiful home in Winter Park, but I had that behind me, and I also think as I've talked to my kids about this, um, I wasn't fearful because I'm surrounded by people that love me, my family, my friends. I'm very fortunate, so it was. I knew I had a net, and it wasn't even a conscious thought. And I only see it when I look back on it. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, you had so much context and you had so much perspective right there, very wise, that a lot of people may not have, which is that, first of all, you've already made some money, like you said, so you were fortunate in that case. But also knowing that family, the love around you, is more important than any sort of professional success or failure. And as I struggle with my own business, I try to keep that in mind all the time. I've got a wife and two kids, and as long as I have that, I think everything's going to be okay. But it's
Yeah.
easy to sometimes get caught up in all the stress of whatever's going on in the business and go, oh man, what if this doesn't work out? Then I'm going to be out on the street or something. But then I just think, well, if I'm out on the street, at least if I have my family, I'll be, we'll be
Well,
okay.
I'm a lot wiser at 58 than I was at 38. I'll tell you
Yeah.
that much. And
Yeah.
the other thing is, it's not linear. Success is not linear. Success is like this. you
Totally.
know and
Yeah.
you just hope it goes up, but it wobbles a lot, and you get punched and you get kicked, and you just can't whine about it. I mean, it's like guilt is great to keep you from doing bad things, but it's not good to wallow in it. And that's the
Yeah.
same thing with failure. I mean, failure is great if you just get out of it quickly.
Yeah. What was the biggest mistake or failure you made in your career?
Um, from a business standpoint, probably trying to be too many different things to too many different types of clients.
Mm,
In spite of the fact that I was told and taught not to do that, to pick a geographic region. I focused on software engineers in Massachusetts and then in Florida and moved around. But even within software engineering, just be the guy that recruits Java developers at
mm,
at the architect level, working in the healthcare space. And if that's all you do, you very quickly become the best at that and very well known at that, and therefore can
interesting.
charge more for that.
Yeah.
So, but you go after the low hanging fruit when things are you're struggling with stuff. You're like, well, should I discount my services here, or I can find a guy like that, and that just ends up distracting you, and you lose focus when you do that. But it's very tempting, and I've done it many times.
Interesting. I mean, I've had that conversation so many times too, and it's so scary to go down the one rabbit hole and be in that one niche.
Hmm.
But there's, they say the riches are in the niches for a reason, right?
Yeah.
If you are the expert on Java developers in healthcare in Massachusetts, then you know exactly who you're looking for, exactly how to serve them, and you become the go-to expert. And eventually, all the clients are coming your way if you provide a good service, right? It's just scary going into that.
Well, I think the way I think about it is two things. One is the diversity can come later when you're already profiting on doing a great job in a niche. If you want to expand a division or a geographic region or different market, you do that, but you do that with the profits that come from having focused on being an expert in one thing, you know, and that's it's a constant adjustment. You probably have heard and read the term pivoting a lot in what you do.
Hmm.
You pivot your business, you pivot your business plan, you make changes with regard to the market and so on. But so you don't have to stay in a niche. Diversity is a good thing, but I think you start niche and you grow into a more diverse marketplace would be my experience, my recommendation.
Cool. So when we started talking and you sent info over and everything, you said your big goal, passion right now is around helping people find meaningful work.
Hmm.
And I'm curious to hear more what that means. I listened to your story. It's similar to my own in that, kind of accidentally fell into things based on people I met. And I think that happens to a lot of people. And sometimes you get lucky and sometimes you get unlucky, right?
Hmm.
So how do
Hmm.
you find that meaningful work? How do you make sure you're more intentional about getting into a career or a job that is going to be meaningful or fulfilling, or at least something that is going to be beneficial for you long term versus, the pitfalls, making the mistakes, going in the wrong direction?
Well, I think it's a great question. I think one of the things I found when I started moving my business from the transactional placements and fees to the consulting and coaching was I would start to talk to somebody, whether it was a 17-year-old or a 57-year-old, and I would say, what do you do right now? And then eventually, what do you want to do? And those were usually two disparate things. And a lot of people I find are doing what they're doing because their dad did that, or their mom did that, or their uncle had a store, or I was told I should be a doctor or a lawyer. They're not necessarily doing things because you make those decisions when you're too young to be able to make those decisions, right? And so most people don't revisit that. Most people don't even pay attention to that. So the first thing I do is say, pay attention, right? That's how you get lucky. Pay attention. Your mentor might be on the yoga mat next to you, right? You don't know. You have to pay attention. And the natural ease with which I talk to people because I like to puts me in more conversations. And you're probably the same way. I open up discussions with people at Starbucks. I open up discussions with strangers. I'm very intellectually curious, and that's just paying attention is the start. You know, so
Yeah,
that makes sense.
self-awareness.
Yeah.
Self-awareness so huge, right? Just
Yeah.
understanding who you are, what you're good at, what you enjoy. Are there when you talk to people about that, are there any exercises that you recommend people go through to kind of figure out, okay, I've got a career change. Friends, I'm thinking of a friend of mine right now named Ben who recently got laid off and he's trying to
Mhm.
figure out his next move, right?
Mhm.
What do you generally recommend in that situation when you're trying to figure out, okay, where should my career go from here? What should I do next?
Well, as a result of bumping into this issue with so many people and basically saying, why would we start finding you a job before we determine what you really want to do? And so the first thing I do is get them to think about that. And the second thing is I wrote up a workbook, and you can get it on my website. I can get you the link after we're done here, but it's a free downloadable 7 or 10 page workbook, and it's basically to help you find your true purpose. And it asks you to reflect on a series of questions and give honest answers in the quiet of a room on your own with everything turned off in a kind of meditative state, and really do the diligent work of being very, very honest with yourself. It's a very simple exercise, but because it's such an honest exercise, it can also be very difficult exercise. A lot of us don't like to be completely true with ourselves.
Right. Yeah. And how often do we spend time quietly just reflecting, thinking about ourselves, what we care about? Is there an element of that? I often recommend to people too, that in addition to the quiet self-reflection time, that you seek feedback and ideas from friends and family, keeping in mind, taking things with a grain of salt, because they may have a biased opinion of what you should do next. But I also find that people often see our strengths and what we get excited about before we even see that sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's true. I think the feedback is awesome. And that goes back to the fail fast idea. That's another great cliche, which is, if you're writing a book, the best thing you can do, and you do this if you like, it's just a suggestion, is get the first chapter, the second chapter, the first 3 chapters, get it in front of people, get it in front of clients, get it out on LinkedIn, make it a free downloadable first chapter read. I mean, Amazon gives you that first chapter view when you publish there, but you can't possibly get it where you want it to be. I don't care what it is, an online course or a book or a video or whatever, without the feedback of some intelligent and objective people. And that initial feedback is typically a huge step in quality. And then you can publish. And then you come out with version 2 and version 3 as you perfect and polish over time. A lot of people wait to get something perfect, which is impossible, and don't bother shipping or turning the switch, so it's kind of a double-edged sword.
Yeah, so true. With the book, I mean, I'm just trying to get through the whole first draft, and then I'll start, releasing some of it, getting feedback from people. I hired an editor who's going to go through it and hopefully make it a lot better looking and sounding, or reading or whatever, than what it is, because I'm certainly not a professional writer.
Yeah.
Okay, so we talked about really connecting with yourself, your purpose, where you want to go, maybe getting feedback from some people as well. And then what's the next step for people to really find that meaningful work, to actually find the right job or business for them?
Well, I'm a big fan of LinkedIn as a tool.
Me too.
I've used it for a long time, over 10 years, and I've been called an expert in it. I don't know what that means, but I find that even more so over time, I don't talk to anybody unless I find them on LinkedIn or Google them, or I find out about them before I talk to them. And I think everybody's kind of like that, particularly when you ease up into that more professional layer, the 50 to 100K and greater position, where it might be referred to as an executive position or a management position.
Right.
But even young people, I tell my kids, you start networking early and start gathering information on people. But so it becomes tactical at that point. Once you get the strategy of what it is you want to do, then it becomes tactical. But I think the other thing that I'm reminded of every time I talk to somebody is everyone has a very traditional way of looking for work. There's a resume, there's a cover letter, there's online, there's job boards, there's portals to job descriptions. I kind of refer to that as a black hole, right? I think the way to find a job is to find the person who's hiring for that position and get them on the phone, right? And some people think that's aggressive, and some people are scared to do that. And most people don't even think about that because it doesn't appear to be proper or the protocol. And so I told somebody yesterday, you're putting your resume in front of either a robot or a human resources person who, with due respect, doesn't have the particular skill set that you're looking to give to this company. They're looking for, based on the direction of someone else, a certain level of acronyms or quantity of experience or type of degree. So your personality, your ability to articulate, your work ethic, all the things that are really important, the person doing the hiring never gets to see that before another person says, we're not interested in talking to you. And you never get any of that feedback. So you don't even know how they're making their decisions. So I get people on LinkedIn, I get them to join groups, I get them to start networking and reaching out to people and basically say, tell the world, everyone, that you're looking, and then tell them what you're looking for.
Yep.
Because then it becomes that 6 degrees of separation, right?
Yep.
And somebody goes, oh, my uncle could use somebody like that. Or I went to college with somebody that does that kind of
Yeah.
work. It's just, all you have to do is start the conversation and ask Alex. We had this discussion a year or so ago, and
Yeah.
the momentum that it created
Yeah.
was incredible. And it was really fun to watch. And I had no idea how much I had helped him until I started to watch the results of the help
Yeah.
come to fruition.
Yeah.
And he's been very grateful, and it's been a lot of fun. But
Yeah.
it's to me, I was so happy to do it, not only because he's a friend, but because I just saw this guy go from a place where he didn't want to be to a
Mhm.
place where he's really having a blast now. And I had a little something to do with that. And that's
That's
where
cool.
that's so cool. I mean, it's
Yeah.
just so cool. You
It
know?
is so cool, and I love that advice. I've given similar advice many times, whether it's people looking for a job or starting a business, looking for clients, whatever. You've got to get really specific about what you're looking for, and you got to be willing to ask people for help, because no one can help you until they know what you need. But
Yep.
when everybody knows you're looking for a job as a software engineer in a healthcare company, then they can go, "Oh yeah, you know what? My brother works for a healthcare company. Let me see if he can connect me, with the head of engineering or something like that." But no one's going to make that introduction or that connection until they know exactly what you're looking for. So when you're willing to ask for help and get as specific as possible, then light bulbs start going off. People start making introductions, recommendations,
Yep.
and the connections start happening on LinkedIn too, which is where I spend most of my time being in B2B sales. I'm on there all day, every day.
Yep.
And that's where I would be as well. If I was looking for a job, I'd be on there hunting. And I like what you said about just get the hiring manager on the phone. I don't know if I would even think to do that as well. It's definitely outside the box. Um, and I'm wondering, in some ways, that's kind of the role of the recruiter as well, right? Connecting you
Mhm.
with the right person and being that intermediary. So do you recommend generally that if people are looking for a job that they go with a recruiter, or they can do this stuff themselves that are willing to be aggressive enough?
Well, I think it's kind of a balance of all these things, right? And when I tell people about recruiters, there's a way to talk to a recruiter, right?
Mm,
That's another thing that I can teach someone how to do. I did that with my younger brother, who's in the healthcare space in Nashville, and he ended up getting a job 3 weeks later after not calling me for a month looking for work. And he said, "Well, you're not in healthcare and you're not in Nashville. How can you help me?" I said, "What I do has nothing to do with either one of those
right.
things."
Got to ask for
So,
help.
and then it's also human nature to people are reticent to ask for help. We don't want
Mhm.
to impose on other people. We don't want to
Yeah.
ask too much of other people. And when we start to ask and we receive the help, we find that people love to help.
Yes.
So it's kind of an ironic situation. And getting a manager on the phone. I mean, that's how I was taught to do the job. Right? Is how do I find this person? How do I determine whether this individual is empowered to make this kind of a decision and influence this decision, and then get him on the phone or her on the phone. I had a good friend of mine years ago started a business that he ended up selling later for about $30 million. He's the best salesman I've ever come in contact with, and he needed to get the owners of professional sports stadiums, indoor stadiums, on the phone to sell what he was selling that no one else had ever tried to sell before. Um, and the first guy he called was the owner of the Philadelphia 76ers, who's a fitness nut. I can't remember his name or whether he's still there, but um, he called, the assistant picked up the phone. She said, "Who's calling? Can I tell him who's calling?" And he said, "Yes, tell him it's Larry Bird." And she put the call through, and the guy answered the phone and said, "Hey, Larry, how you doing?" And my friend said, "Sir, my name's not Larry Bird. My name's Chris, and I got something I think is going to blow you away. I just need 5 minutes of your time." And the guy, being an entrepreneur and a billionaire himself,
Yeah.
totally respected the courage that took. And he said, "Give it to me, kid." And he had 26 contracts in the next 12 months at every stadium in the country. It was unbelievable.
Unbelievable.
Oh,
Oh,
I mean, once you push the ball to the top of the hill,
yeah.
and then you just tip it over the other side, it starts picking up speed. I mean, it couldn't be any one of a number of little things.
Yeah.
That's a big thing, but it's a 10-minute window in his life, and it changed his entire life.
Oh
You know?
my gosh. Yeah.
So yeah, it's a good story.
That's incredible. That is incredible. And I aspire to get better and more creative at sales like that. You mentioned something to me right before we recorded. You said you're involved with something called the Inspired Performance Institute. What is that?
Yeah, that's a company that I'm working with the founder and a couple of executives there in a marketing capacity to help scale the organization. The founder, Dr. Don Wood, is a PhD in clinical therapy. And long story short, his family, his wife, his daughter, and his son had different significant levels of ailment, physical and emotional. And he sought solutions that didn't exist. He was being told, "We've got a drug for you," or "There's a surgical procedure we can do," or "This is something you're just going to have to live with for the rest of your life, and we can mitigate the effects of it, but we can't cure it." And so he spent years and years going after the idea that we've got this stuff embedded in our subconscious from childhood, from our past. Everyone has experienced challenge. Some people call it trauma when it's significant, but it makes us behave in ways that we're often unaware of. And it covers a gamut of conditions, very severe sexual abuse and PTSD to, I get a little anxious when people raise their voice because my dad used to yell at me when I was a kid. So it's all these different levels of subconscious trauma, which create stress, which creates inflammation, which creates most illness. So there's that mind-body connection. Anyway, he came up with this program, which I'm helping market. And you go through the program. I talk to people who are anticipating purchasing it, and then I talk to people who have gone through it. And from drug addiction, alcoholism, PTSD, and sexual abuse to panic attacks and anxiety, I've talked to hundreds of people in the last few months that have come out the other end with just life-changing epiphanies. Because he can move with his technique, he can move that subconscious trauma into the past, and it never recurs again as if it's happening today. And so I can't discuss the science because I'm not a scientist. The simplicity of it, the ease with which, the effortless way you can go through it, and the efficiency in terms of how quick it can happen. We're getting really busy. We're speaking at a lot of events, and he's getting a name, and he's, I think we're getting introduced next week to Deepak Chopra, and we've got Lady Gaga wants to go through I mean, there's all kinds of stuff going on. It's going from a little thing in Orlando to a global thing overnight. And the scalability is the challenge. But it also fits right into what I do with my other business, because I'm helping people overcome significant challenge so they can perform better in life.
Yeah.
So it plugged in really nicely. I paid attention when I was introduced to him a couple of years ago, and here we are.
Oh, that's fantastic. That does sound really cool. I'll have to keep track of that.
Yeah.
Speaking of helping people perform at their best, you mentioned earlier another topic that you're really passionate about is that of mentorship.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been lucky to have some great mentors over the years, always on the lookout for others. I find that's common among very successful people. They talk about having mentors along the way. You have mentioned in your story, you had a couple of really great mentors early on who helped you set you up on your path.
Mm-hmm.
So what's your take on this idea of mentorship, and how should people think about finding mentors? And a lot of times it just happens, right? You get lucky and run into the right person, but
Mm-hmm.
can you be more intentional about finding a great mentor to help you with your career or your life?
Yeah, that's another great question. I think you can. I think you got to pay attention. You got to get lucky. You create luck by being in different places at different times and just getting out there and doing things. But I think it goes back to the exercise of finding your true purpose. Is what mentor you seek and hopefully find is contingent upon what you need to be mentored in, right? And the toughest part about a good mentor is you really also are looking for some level of character and morality, because even though one of my mentors didn't really swing the bat very well in that space, I stayed away from that side of his life, and he was a brilliant businessman. So that I needed the moral strength to not move in that direction. But if you can get both, it's great. I would then go, after you find out what it is you want to do, I would then go to LinkedIn. I would use the tool. I would join groups in that space, and I would start reaching out to people in that space, and I would be asking for who might be interested in mentoring. And I would also be well prepared to be very articulate and specific about what I was willing to do for him or her in return for that mentorship. Because I think the expectation there would be accomplishing something on their behalf, working on their behalf, moving the ball forward for them in some capacity. Well, what does that mean? What skills do you bring to the table? And so that's the intentional part. I would look for that person. And I think in the traditional fashion, Andy, I think most people don't even consider that. Most people think mentor apprentice is kind of like old school stuff, or that's not, if I'm just going to take a traditional career path and go to work for someone else, I'll find a mentor within that organization, which may very well happen. But I think you have to create the mindset that that's something you should be doing. That's the start.
Yeah, absolutely. I've given similar advice too, and I've done similar things using LinkedIn. So once you know what career path you want to follow, if there's a job you're trying to get, or certain profession you're trying to get into, or you're just trying to get better or move up in your own profession, whether it's HR, finance, legal, whatever, find people on LinkedIn who seem like they are successful in that space. And usually tell people, just reach out and ask them if they can, if they'll get coffee or do a 20-minute phone call with you. You want to ask them some questions. That's it. You don't want anything else from them. Most people will say yes. They're very happy to give back, to help others coming up in their careers. I've never had anybody say no to that.
Uh-huh.
And then I think the more specific you can get with exactly what you're trying to achieve, the more likely they are to want to help you. And then, maybe one of them wants to be your mentor. And maybe I like what you said too about think about how you can contribute to them. Can you do some work for them? Can you make introductions for them? Can you support them in some other way? And they might also just be happy and fulfilled just for being able to help you.
Yeah, no, I think that mentors can become partners, can become co-collaborators, can sit on your board of directors. They can become all kinds of things. Those can be lifelong relationships, or they can serve their purpose and the two parties move on. It's not a one or the other kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So right now, Mark, your main business is in career coaching and mentorship and helping people. What's the focus of your business now?
I'm really getting enamored with the performance side of things
Mm.
and the visibility and the momentum that that business is creating. And my experience in scaling other operations is a valuable asset to them as well. So I like the variety of it, and I'm not really moving out of one space into another. I'm expanding on I'm moving from career specific coaching to perhaps performance and life coaching with a focus on career inside of that. So it's a work in progress, but I'm being pulled in both directions, and I like being pulled in both directions. If my head doesn't explode, I'm going to keep doing
I like it.
that.
It's exciting. Well, for anybody listening who wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Probably because it's easier to remember, mark@inspiredperformanceinstitute.com. So I got a number of email addresses. I'd like to give you my own career site too, Andy, if I may.
Sure.
It's the number 7 and then the word pillars, PILLARS, and the word global, 7pillarsglobal.com. And if any of your audience is interested in free career content, practical advice, you can download a bunch of stuff from that site. You can find me on social sites from that site. I do a lot of posting on and article writing on Quora and LinkedIn, most of which is very practical and tactical. And I point people there too that I coach, because I'm like, there's 2 ways to do this, right? You can go read everything I've ever written and watch everything I've ever recorded.
Yep.
And if you're paying attention and you're taking notes and you're executing on the work and the instruction, you can get where you're going. If you want to expedite that journey, you got to pay me some money to do that. But it's a choice.
Right.
They both work.
Yeah. It's 2020. I don't think people necessarily pay for information anymore. It's all out there. Give away your best content. People pay for execution, right? And if they
Yeah.
want your help along the journey, they'll be willing to invest. Well, Mark, this has been awesome. I appreciate you investing your time to come and share some of your story and your wisdom.
Sure.
It's been great for me, especially as I'm on this journey writing this book and talking to more people about career ownership, career development. You've kind of justified a lot of things that I've been thinking, that I've been writing.
Good.
It's great to hear that stuff, and I hope it's been helpful for people listening, especially if they're thinking about their own careers. So thanks again for coming on the show.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Andy. And let's collaborate some more. This has been fun.
For sure. Take care.
Okay. You too.